Thank you very much, dear Chair. I retired a year ago and feel nevertheless young enough to continue writing and giving some lectures as today to meet with you and take up the ball like in a football game from Julia, from Dörtje and from Wilhelm. But perhaps be a little bit more provocative because honestly, and I told this also to Niels and Heinz Stockinger when they asked me to give them some thoughts on the proposal elaborated by Wilhelm and how to continue. And I told them, as long as you do not touch EURATOM, you will not end up at a better energy market, because EURATOM simply blocks everything. Now, how to do with EURATOM? When I was a very young, I think at that time even I had not yet done the habilitation, I met our Minister of Environment, Mrs. Gewessler. She was at that time in the global 2000 movement, I think, somewhere at the top. And we had a conference in Vienna, and I said, the only way to create pressure on EURATOM is to leave EURATOM. It's the only way. And if you imagine that Austria would take the decision jointly with Denmark, that the two states start an exiting procedure from EURATOM, you can be sure that the members will start very rapidly to follow the approach of Dörtje and take up the procedure under Article 48 and think of how at least to change EURATOM. So even if the two will finally not leave EURATOM, maybe the result of such a procedure could be that so much pressure, political pressure, will appear that the treaty will be substantially amended. Now, I will give you a sign. I think, let me try first. It's this way. Yes. That's not. So I just, so it works now? Okay, thank you. Now, I took this picture here from the US Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and it bears the title, Changing the Game by Linking Nuclear and Renewable Energy Systems. The article dates from 8 December 2016 and shows you the thinking of the EU Commission and where the EU Commission is taking her ideas from. It's not the idea of my proposal, of course, and the idea is, moreover, to change the title to say changing the game by replacing nuclear and other non-renewable energy systems by renewable energy systems. Now, the proposal, which I finally then made after long discussions with Niels and Heinz, was not the revolution I personally would favor, to say leave EURATOM and forget about, but to say let us use the idea of Wilhelm and put the idea of Wilhelm straight into the EURATOM treaty, and either do it like Dörtje mentions through a procedure according to Article 48, or as a public international lawyer, I would also consider it possible to adopt a protocol on its own, not using the procedure under Article 48, but to say, let us elaborate. For example, some member states like Austria and Denmark elaborate a protocol on transition to nuclear energy and conclude this treaty. And then we come into the relationship of international treaties with the different partners, where the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties would make it possible. Also, this would create a pressure, of course, because the Commission would heavily counteract, but the pressure would be, and something needed then to develop. And what I see is if you simply put a paper before the Commission, nothing happens. You must make pressure. And for pressure, you need to take a risk. And the risk is not really a risk if you say, I want to leave EURATOM, I want to stay a member of the European Union, but I want to leave EURATOM. Now, we heard it from all before. What does it mean? It means that the Commission indeed, also with regard to what you criticized with the classification of nuclear energy, if you take the obligations of the Commission under the Euratom Treaty, they are obliged to do so. That's the problem. And I think this will also be the problem of the complaint Austria submitted before the General Court, because this is a very strong legal basis in EU primary law, or one cannot say in EU primary law, but in primary treaty law, that the Commission has the obligation to further a strong, powerful nuclear industry. That's currently a treaty obligation. And the treaty obligation, as Julia correctly pointed out, is as strong as any other primary law obligation under the Charter of European Rights of Freedoms or under the EU treaty. And you get rid of this only if you bypass the Euratom Treaty and if you eliminate the legal basis from this point of view. The same goes for the whole privilegiation of the EU energy nuclear market, which is privileged by this system based on the Euratom Treaty. And as long as this stays as it is, there's no chance for any other type of European energy to stay on a competitive level with nuclear power. Now, the protocol, the purposes of the protocol, as you can see, is to say, and this I consider very wisely by Niels and Heinz adopted, to say, let us gradually move out from nuclear power and do this on the basis of a protocol which respectively changes the Euratom Treaty. It means then you will then have a clear end date of Euratom laid down in the treaty. We said the 31st of December 2040. It is a proposal for negotiations. Even if you might end up in 2050, it's still a big success. If you end in 2060, it's still a success. And parallel to this, this gradual liquidation of Euratom to provide for the respective safety guarantees that the process needs for elaboration of research, for example, in the context of how safely to restore the nuclear waste, how safely to close down all nuclear facilities, what to do with all the uranium cycle and all enterprises involved in this cycle, how to assist them, also to consider, for example, unemployment raised in certain areas, and what and how to cover all these collateral effects in this context. The next, please. At the end, it would be a full replacement of nuclear power by renewable energies. That's the idea of the protocol. Now, the method is quite easier. If you look at the contents, on the left hand, you see the current contents of the EURATOM Treaty, and on the right hand, you see the proposed amended context. There I later saw the expertise, the legal expertise that I made for the Austrian government. There are some differences. Personally, for example, I consider that why not to use the instrument of joint undertakings for renewable energy? In the idea in the expertise or the reform proposals you had was to say these joint undertakings are not necessary anymore. But one could say, and I think this is what we can learn from Wilhelm's presentation, what was good for nuclear power can also be good for renewables in the same manner. That means you can use the institutions that have been built up by EURATOM. You can use the funding system, the finance system, and profit for this for renewable energies. You have a respective experience, you have the know-how, you have the organizational setup. You simply need to redirect it in two parallel phases. The first phase is to redirect it into the phasing out of nuclear energy. That means liquidation of EURATOM in this process until 2040, 2050 or 2060. And in parallel, equipping the European Union directly with the respective know-how and knowledge and possibilities in order to build up a powerful renewable energy system. And that is the idea. And this I simply put into the current wording and change the wording accordingly. So if you move further to, and the next one, and the next one. And here in the preamble, you see it very clearly because on the right hand, you can see the text of Wilhelm, more or less. It's slightly changed, but text taken from from his protocol, but moved into the preamble of the EURATOM Treaty. And then you see on the left hand, for example, currently you see there the creation of conditions for powerful nuclear industry. And you can say on the other hand, safeguarding the functioning of the energy market, guaranteeing of the security of energy supply of the parties, promotion of energy efficiency, and all these things more. And you must imagine this is just a proposal for negotiations. Even if only half of the text will be taken finally, it is a revolution which you achieve. And even if they replace just the left hand and take an accordingly thick or elaborated text from the right side, because if you continue, you see the text is much longer, and the next one. So if they just take the first page, it would be more than enough to fully change the system. Now this is the method. Now if you continue, where are the key issues that needed to be changed? And here I'm very close to Dörte and her expertise. On the one hand, it's of course the tasks that need to be fundamentally changed. The current tasks of EURATOM must be redirected towards support of phasing out from nuclear energy by the liquidation date. And this must be supplemented by tasks on the EU side, which parallel needs to create an energy transition. ensure a secure, environmentally friendly, sustainable and affordable energy supply in Europe by means of renewable energies, by means of renewable energies only. Promote energy savings, energy efficiency, and promote respective research, because currently all research in this field is directed towards strengthening nuclear industry, even not, for example, towards figuring out how a safe or whether and under which conditions a safe storage of nuclear waste could happen. You don't have these research programs, but these research programs would be part of such an amended system. Other measures that are necessary in this context. The responsibility of the Commission needed to be fully redirected. If the Commission's role will be, on the one hand, strengthening the support of the EU and build up of an energy system based on renewable energies, renewable sources, then you have one hand, and on the other hand, if the support of the Commission in the field of nuclear energy will be redirected only to supporting the phasing out process, it's already fundamentally different, and it is congruent for the needs that are currently to be fulfilled. Then I've made some proposals, for example, by sure Articles 24 to 28, 52, 70 to 72, and 76 of the current treaty needed to be abolished, because they are closely linked to a powerful nuclear industry, to promotion of nuclear industry. They cannot be used for renewable energies. But the other articles can be, for example, the investment measures, the joint undertakings. The agency must be liquidated, but the agency is needed for the phasing out process, and for the phasing out process, it can be redirected by a few changes in the wording of the respective articles. You can see it still, I saw when you enter the archive section of NOAA website here in Denmark, you can see the clean version of the full proposal and the text, and I think Plage also will have it somewhere, because it was elaborated for these two institutions. And then key provisions that need to be changed: the ownership of on all materials that are currently with EURATOM, needed, of course, to transit to the EU directly. There may not and must not be any article anymore on a common nuclear market. There shall be just an EU energy market, and this privilege of the nuclear sector has to be abolished in full. This is something which one needs to take care of. Then, of course, for renewable energy, we don't find anything in the current wording, and this we need to introduce here, and therefore a new Title 4 on encouragement of progress in the field of renewable energies, where you once more can find many ideas of Wilhelm's protocol adjusted to the wording of the Euratom Treaty and directly phrased like articles, because I used the language of the treaty and put all the provisions as articles of this new treaty. And then a new chapter on renewable energy sources with targets, action plans, the energy market, energy efficiency, and energy safety. And then the financing instruments also mentioned and showed by William, for example, public procurement, kept like they are, but changed on the one hand to phasing out, and on the other hand, to creation of an EU renewable energy sector. Then the abolition of the member states' obligation to communicate classification. These are all, you can say, cosmetic issues, tiny issues. Then issues you owe to the character of an international treaty. You need to end the legal personality, the privileges and immunities of the bodies of EURATOM that exist currently and of EURATOM as a whole. And then you can, however, I consider use the scientific committee, but now for science research in the field of renewable energy. No, just change the direction. And I think the committee to promote environmentally friendly forms of energy, replacing the current nuclear committee, that would also be a very profitable way of how to make use of capacity and of know-how that exists. And this could be done. Now, the problem is the time. I had been asked to do so in 2019. I was not here in 2018, so it's my first time here in Denmark. But in 2019, I've been asked. In 2019, the time was very good. In 2022, since the speculation of the European Commission on the gas sector started, because it's not only Russia which is the responsible. Much went wrong on the EU side a considerable time before the warfare in the Ukraine. But when this started, from that moment onwards, we lost one, I consider, essential player in the field of transition to renewable energy, and that is Russian gas at reasonable prices. Because you cannot top and raise the prices and try to make an expensive transition process on prices that are 5 or 6 times higher than the prices were before. And you cannot consider that the transition to renewable energies will work without any safe fundament which you can use for a transition period. And you must also imagine that whatever will be reached in the EU, if this will not be reached in Russia, in the Arabic Emirates, in China and India, in a comparable time, or best at the same time, or in a comparable time thereafter, you will fail. The European industry will not be competitive anymore. We will have a mass unemployment in Europe, and we will have an economic disaster. So this is why one should also listen carefully when Putin speaks of 10 years, of a decade to come. Yes, that we have entered a decade, and I think we need also, with regard to this transition now, think of a decade. I'm still optimistic that there is no alternative than, in the long run, to change to renewable energies. It must be done, therefore, and therefore I uphold this position, and I uphold also my my request to Mrs. Gewessler, our minister, and to your future minister, to seriously consider to leave EURATOM and to start a respective exit procedure. This can be done clearly on the legal ground. You can exit from EURATOM and stay a member of the European Union. And once you start with this, you will see that the whole thing will start to work, and the machinery in Brussels will explode in the interest of renewable energy. Thank you very much.
Okay, there are 4 minutes left until the coffee break, so there is place for questions. Yes, Neil, Henrik.
Thank you, Michael, for this excellent presentation. I have two questions, but mainly for clarification. If I understood you right, this switch of treaties that you propose would signify that the provisions on deployment of renewables enter into force immediately, whereas the gradual phasing out of the EURATOM treaty stops by 2040,
Yes,
if I understand
correct.
you correctly.
Correct.
And my second question would be that is it correct that your position on the amendment procedure with respect to this switch of treaties means that you don't have to use the ordinary amendment procedure under Article 48 in the treaty on the European Union, and you do not need a constitutional convention as is the norm in these cases?
Yeah. This in the second question is more complex because this indeed is a public international legal issue. The way how it is conceived, the understanding is to try it without the procedure of Article 48. But to say to try it because I expect that the European Commission will intervene at some given moment of time and try to consider this to be legal according to the current Article 106A of the EURATOM Treaty, where it is said that the change of the EURATOM Treaty as such requires the procedure according to Article 48, because Article 48 is, two following is applicable as Dörte showed to us earlier. But since it is a protocol of its own, for example, Denmark, Austria, Sweden, some other states could simply sit down and say, let us start to elaborate this proposal and to negotiate first on this draft, come to a joint draft, which all of them can support, which may considerably deviate from what I propose here, but take this as a draft and then send it to the bodies of the European Union, send it to the other member states and tell them, please, what you consider, we are willing to sign this protocol. Do you want to join us? And then we will end up at the moment when it's getting into a legal dispute, because then it might be the first reaction of the Commission giving a warning to all member states stating this is not according to the procedure of Article 106A, because what you are doing in substance is you want to change the Euratom Treaty. But it is a protocol, which is not formally an amendment to the treaty. This is the issue. I could consider that this will then end up at the General Court, at the European Court of Justice for clarification at some moment of time. Some time will then pass, and then we get to know on where we are. But the result will be already that we are in a process of fundamentally restructuring Euratom, which currently, as Dörte has told us, is totally blocked by the European Commission. And this I consider as the big advantage of proceeding as proposed.
If I may add, because I think history is repeating it, and it's great in a way. In May 2003, I talked about the convention. I wrote a paper with Anthony Froggatt on the options for the Euratom Treaty under the framework for a new constitution, because at that time we had the constitutional process. And in our conclusions, on the legal side, I did write, and insofar I wrote, if the convention does not address the Euratom issue, then it is necessary for the Intergovernmental Conference to take action. This would need to be promoted by these member states that do not wish to grant nuclear power special status. They should analyze the risk and cost of phasing out of the treaty under the different alternatives, be it via unanimous procedure rules, or if necessary, member states should leave the treaty in accordance with the relevant international rules. So you are proposing the second in order to start the first.
I would propose the second and then take the first.